Just a quick introduction. My name is Sana Mohammed. I am one of the high school counselors. We have Jennifer Dorn next to me, Dale Samuels, and Ronnie Sherrier. So there's the four of us, and in the back corner we have our amazing administrative assistant, Yuna. She's going to be helping us with the translation today. Today's topics are going to be revolving around some testing updates, letters of recommendation, thank you, how students are going to be able to get those and what they need to know in order to get those letters, a little bit more on Maya Learning, how to use it, what information is on Maya, and then building a list, so making sure that we have your students building a balanced college list. So the timeline of college lessons so far that we've completed with the junior class. So back in October, we had a really great senior panel talking to your students about their first time applying to college. In November, we had the mock admissions activity. How many of you did attend that mock admissions session with us in person last semester? Okay. We'll be having another one coming up for you all, so if you were not able to attend, we really encourage you to do so. I think the students also learned a lot from that activity. Back in January, we had our course planning and registration. February, we did the blind college comparisons and match factors, so talking more about kind of other pieces that fit with students in terms of what to look into with colleges. In this month, we started talking to students about researching their universities, building their list, and understanding their deadlines and requirements. So all of the juniors are required to have up to between 15 and 20 colleges by the time we come back from break on their Maya account. In April, we'll be beginning to work on their applications for the next year, and then in May, we'll be starting to work on college essays.
So today's meeting with you guys is really to kind of bring us kind of all on the same page. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to cover a lot of those same topics that we've been going over with your kids over the last 3 or 4 lessons, as we've been kind of meeting with them every other week. And so kind of bringing you guys kind of up to speed with where they're at. And as you can see, kind of after spring break is really when they're starting to work specifically on their applications and the different pieces of that. It's also going to be when we have those one-on-one meetings too. So this is kind of a last time that we kind of talk very broadly to you all about the application process before starting to kind of dive into the individual applications that they're putting together, as well as your own kind of goals, expectations, and what that'll look like for you and your family.
Some updates on testing. We heavily encourage students to only take the test they're required to take. Extra testing is not helpful, especially for U.S. college admissions. And we definitely feel that students' time can be better spent working more on focusing on grades, their activities, and things like that. In general, we encourage students to plan to take the SAT or the ACT, one of these twice, with the goal of being done by June. So if any of your students have not taken the SAT at all at this point, we definitely recommend them to take it by June, because senior year comes and it gets very stressful. They are focused more on college applications, and we want that one piece of the application to not be as stressful for them. TOEFL, Duolingo, or the ELTS, you can take once if needed over the summer break. And then AP exams, these are tests, of course, that follow the courses that they're taking at KS and are usually at the beginning of May. Anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just add, again, with like what Sana was saying, is the time management piece is going to be really important. Mm-hmm. It's such an exciting process for your kids. And the way to kind of keep that excitement is partially reducing the stress from overloading in one area versus the other. And so the SAT or ACT testing, trying to spend a lot of time on that, which we sometimes see with students when they feel they need to make up for something, actually ends up, instead of being a positive, ends up getting in the way of some of the other things they can be working on, and kind of puts them further behind in some of the other pieces that will be probably more beneficial at this stage in looking at their applications. So as we've been kind of saying, we want them to be shooting for being done with testing by the end of junior year, if possible. If any of you or your students kind of still have extensive testing plans, I would say talk to us. It still might make sense, right? Every family and every student's going to be an individual and have their own kind of needs and expectations, but we'd probably want to have a conversation just so we can provide some guidance in that area.
Columbia latest college to announce that they will be test optional permanently. So we just wanted to highlight one of the more selective colleges, stating this fact. A lot of universities in the U.S. are still planning to stay test optional. If you're not sure about a specific university, you can definitely connect with us or check their university's website to see if they've had any updates listed. But Columbia specifically has mentioned that, and so that's something we want to highlight, especially because, again, the SAT is important in terms of admissions, but it may not be the most important piece of the puzzle, and we're going to definitely talk more about that throughout the year with the students as well.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to say that in this test optional phase of after COVID, it's really important for you and your students to continue to look at the university's websites. Most of them are coming up with their updates for next year's application cycle, which will be your children, so you're wanting to be watched for those. But overwhelmingly, we who look at those regularly, I believe there are 2 schools now that are going back to using testing. The rest of them have remained test optional or have announced that they will be permanently test optional. They've recognized, they have enough data over the last few years to recognize that it doesn't help them predict the student's success on campus as they had thought before, so they're just letting that piece go to always optional. And that is a very personal decision for you and your child to make. Some students are wonderful testers, and they really enjoy multiple choice testing, and they do really well at it. And if that's the case, the SAT may add to their application, and then they should include it. But many students are not natural testers. They would prefer projects and collaboration or writing papers even. Every learner is different. And so if your child is not a strong tester, then it is a really good opportunity for you to have that conversation and say, great, let's let go of that piece and focus where you can make a bigger difference, where it'll be more important and more impactful in your application.
One of the themes, for those of you who've been to some of our other meetings talking about college, is that universities are not going to try to trick you. They're going to try to be very kind of upfront with what's important to them and what they're looking for in an applicant. And these are good opportunities to kind of see exactly what they think about certain pieces, right? As Jennifer had mentioned, there are a couple of universities who've gone back to requiring tests. And for them, if that university is going to be a good fit for your child, then taking a test, doing well on that test, is probably going to be a piece that will be important. Columbia, University of Washington was the example I think we had in the fall, where they have gone to test optional permanently. They're kind of making a statement with whether or not that's an important piece or how important it is. And that's going to be true when we kind of look at some of the other pieces of the application. The universities are going to be pretty straightforward with what they're looking for. They're not going to try to be ambiguous in any way.
So one of the important pieces of an application is the teacher letter of recommendation. So I just want to talk a little bit about how your child goes about requesting those letters and kind of what things to think about and to consider when requesting letters of recommendations from teachers. So one of the most important things is to choose a teacher that knows you best, and for your child to think about what teachers and what classes have they taken where they have kind of demonstrated their learning abilities and learning characteristics and how they are in the classroom and how they are as learners. This is going to be really important in selecting a teacher who is going to be able to write a fantastic, well-detailed, well-thought-out letter of recommendation for your child. Another thing to consider is, are there any specific requirements from colleges? Do colleges require them to have a letter of recommendation in a certain subject, for example? Is that a science subject or a math subject or a social studies or humanities subject? And the way to find this out is to go on the websites, to go on the university websites. As Mr. Chari was saying, that universities are very clear about what they're looking for and what they require, and this is going to the website is a great way to find that out.
Do you want to look at that example?
Sure, we can do that now. So how to find teacher recommendation information from colleges, which is, as we've said, going to the, this is really small.
It is so small.
Hopefully you can see
it's
this
big up there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, MIT requires 2 letters of recommendation from teachers. 1 recommendation should be from a math or science teacher, and 1 should be from a humanities, social science, or language teacher. So as you can see, it's very clear what they are looking for.
And theirs is so detailed, it even lists the courses that fall under math and science for them, and the courses that fall under the social studies or humanities section for them as well. So there's no ambiguity, it's very, very clear.
I think we have another example.
Yeah.
And here, this is Stanford. And we recommend here selecting a grade 12 or 11 teacher in one of the following subject areas. So that would be English, math, science, foreign language, or history and social studies. So as you can see, there's a broader range of what they're actually looking for.
I do think it's important to notice the difference in the language, though, that one is recommending, one is requiring, right? And so in the case of Stanford, they're saying this would be typically what we'd be looking for, but we are open to other teachers, other subjects, even other grades, right? Versus MIT, which is saying this is what you have to have or your application's not complete. And it's important to just understand like the difference between those two things, because you are going to see that from the different universities, and understanding when is it like you absolutely have to, when is that something they prefer, right? And again, we do want to kind of follow what universities prefer when possible, but there might be a unique situation where your child, their recommendation letters maybe didn't follow what Stanford recommended, but they had a good reason for that, and that can be understandable.
It is also important to point out Stanford's requirements or recommendations will be something you'll see more frequently than MIT's very specific. Most schools are going to want to see between 0 and 2 letters of recommendations from teachers of course, the main core subjects.
I've had a few students ask me if they can have letters of recommendation from perhaps their grade 10 teacher because they feel that that teacher knows them very well. And as you can see, the recommendation is grade 11 or 12, but with Stanford, they're saying that if that course is from an AP subject, for example, then that is something that they would also consider acceptable as well. As I've just said, kind of colleges prefer teachers from the 11th and 12th grade. This is just because they're recent, and it's about where they are more currently and more recently, and that gives a better insight of who they've become through high school. Your children grow and change and develop and get new habits and all these fantastic qualities that they acquire, and having a teacher from the 11th or 12th grade is a better representation of who they've become. And overall, students, by following these steps, students will get a letter of recommendation that is going to be absolutely fantastic and going to be a great asset to their college applications. All KIS students can get up to 2 amazing letters from their teachers, and they will get another letter, which I'm going to talk a little bit about, from us as their counselors. And this is going to meet the requirement for all of their college applications. Anything to add?
I think one of the questions that comes up a lot when I'm talking to students is they feel like there's maybe a teacher that knows them best, but they're like, but this other, I only have a B+ in that class, and shouldn't I ask the teacher where I'm getting the A? And my response to always to them is the university is going to see the grade that you're getting in the class. They're going to know how you're doing from that academic standpoint. The recommendation letter is about the type of learner you are within the classroom, right? It's not about that you have an A or an A minus or a B plus. It's, are you collaborative? Are you engaged? Are you funny? Are you serious? Are, you know, all the personality quirks where the university can try to figure out if you're a good match for their learning environment. They're going to know what your child's ability in that class is based on the grades they're getting, the classes they're taking. So that doesn't always need to align, and I think some students sometimes feel pressure that, oh, well, these are the classes I'm getting an A, so I have to ask them. The universities will see the grade letter. This is really just about who does know them. You know, where do they feel safe and where they can be themselves, so they can, the teacher can really talk about them as kind of a whole person, which is what the universities are trying to figure out in these letters.
I like to ask kids what the teacher would write about them, right? And imagine you're in a class and maybe it's my favorite subject and it comes pretty easily to me, and I'm getting an A in science, say, versus English is maybe a little bit harder. Writing papers is not my favorite thing to do, but I work really hard in English. So what would my teachers say about me, right? And if that easy A and it comes really easily to me, my science teacher might be able to say, she's getting an A. She usually gets A's. It seems like science is a natural strength. That doesn't really tell the university very much. But in my English class, where I'm working a little bit harder, maybe that teacher is able to say, she did really well in this unit, in this unit, she struggled a little bit. She came to see me during her auto block. She recognized she needed a little bit of extra support, and with a little bit of extra time together, she was able to perform at this level. She now does X, Y, and Z. That second letter really tells the college a lot more about me as a learner, and it helps them predict what I would be like at the university campus, which is really what this whole admissions process is. Will I be successful on their campus? And the first student, you don't really know. In my science class, the university wouldn't necessarily know how I was going to be at their school, or if I ran into any material that is challenging, which hopefully you will at university. But from the second letter, the English letter, the university could really tell what my student skills are, and that I know what to do when I run into an obstacle, which is a very, very important skill for students and for your children just as they're becoming adults, to know what to do, who to turn to, what resources do they have. So it's definitely not the easy A. It's the, what is that teacher going to say about me?
And then on to the counselor letters of recommendation that we're all going to write for your students. And we have our own kind of process on how we're going to make sure these letters are absolutely outstanding and fantastic for each and every student. And that kind of comes from, we get students to fill out a student survey, which gives us a little bit of an insight into their journey. What are they interested in? Where have they had some challenges in school and other information that's important? And then we have an interview with the student as well, where we can ask follow-up questions. This really allows us to get to know your student with great detail and find out really important information to make and write those fantastic letters. And then we have a parent survey, so you can tell us some things that, that you feel is important, and all of that information can really create a very personalized, tailored and unique letter that's going to make your child stand out amongst all of the students. You will get this information. Although we're sharing a lot now, we're very open and clear about how we receive this information and the next meetings we have in the survey. So you'll get all this very clearly for you to know when this is happening.
This is where I want to make my annual plug that more is almost never better. And the letter of recommendation is an area where sometimes students or parents want to send more, right? We love our kids. We know they do all these amazing things, and they also have these great activities outside of school and these clubs and sports, and we want more people to brag about them because we love them so much. But I can promise you that if the university wanted more letters to read, they would ask for them. And in fact, if we start thinking about just our own lives and the work that we do and the jobs that we have, which the admissions officers do, and they're already looking at 20, 25, 30 pages of an applicant and then timesing that by hundreds and thousands, those extra couple of pages is not what they want, right? They want to try to be very clear about these are the ways we want to look at a student, these are what we want to hear, and we want one, maybe we want two. Some universities are going to say, we don't want any. They're going to be very, very specific with what they want. And it's important that we want to do the best version of that application for them. Right? We want to work within the constraints of what they're asking for so that we show that, one, we're reading, we're paying attention, we're following directions, and then two, that we're then kind of focused on those key pieces. Right? I think one of the ways I try to explain this when I talk to students is that as you start to get 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters, it starts to kind of dilute the whole thing. And then that maybe 1 or 2 people in their lives, especially their kind of academic teachers, which is probably the best representation of who they'll be at college, it can kind of start to make that seem less important when there's so much to look at. It just becomes a little more bland. And so again, we understand that, wanting to talk about how great and amazing they are, but just trying to remember that if the university is not asking for it, it's almost always better not to send it. Again, we'll have some of these conversations in the fall as we're putting these applications together, but I just wanted to put that out there.
And encourage your children to come and speak to us. Learning about all the fantastic stuff they are doing in school, outside of school, their passions. I'm learning so much about your kids and students, things that I had no idea they were into. And so if there are amazing things are happening outside of school, ask them, did you tell your counselor? And get them to come and talk to us, and so we can learn about all these fantastic things that they are doing, because it's all a part of them, and that information can be helpful. So as we go through, I really want to stand up for this, I'm sorry. I have to. There's so much good information. As we go through the different parts of the application, universities have kind of weighted how important each part of the application is for them. And so these are the admissions decision factors. And how much weight are they putting on the importance of different parts? So as you can see at the top, grades in all courses and grades in college prep courses, this is out of 100. They've weighted it 74 and 73. So you can be confident knowing that the most important thing in the application is going to be the GPA. And what are they achieving in their everyday classes over the course of high school? That is the most important. Strength of curriculum, as we go down, SAT scores, 45. So you can see, like Mr. Charia and Ms. Dawn touched on it, where too much weight and going into that senior year in that junior year, and there's so much emphasis, or if perhaps too much emphasis going into testing, it can actually be more harmful than beneficial, especially when students can be focusing on other things, what the universities are saying is perhaps more important. And then as you go down, there's essay writing, so the strength of their personal essay. We've got counselor recommendation, teacher recommendation. And so you can see all these different parts are important. But I just want to really emphasize that when it does come to the application, whether universities are going to consider applicants, the most important piece is going to be that GPA and what they've achieved throughout their academic life.
So probably,
Quick question.
yeah.
First of all, are you able to share this slide after the session?
Yeah.
Okay. The second one, does it matter how many number of the SAT tests that they can take? Do the university knows about how many tests that they have gone through, or take care of that?
It doesn't matter. They're looking at the top score that they get. Yeah. I want to mention, because we've got one more piece on this slide to show you. So many of you have probably seen this. We share this quite a bit. And one of the things we always talk about is that this changes from year to year. And, this is from 2019. And so we expect that there's probably been some other changes since then when they do this survey again. But we did add, this is from 10 years prior. These are the 2009 percentages next to them. And so you can see how things have changed in that 10 years. And one of the big things is we've seen a lot of the individual pieces have gone down a little bit. And then we've seen grades have gone up significantly, right? And I think over time, universities have kind of seen more and more that that is the clearest indication of what type of student they're going to be. How are they in every class, day to day, every week, every month, for the entire year, for 4 years, really gives a university a pretty good indication of the type of student they're going to kind of continue to be. And it's not going to be the be-all, end-all, but it's going to be a really, really important piece. And we can kind of see over time that that has continued to grow.
I do want to point out, just to go back to your question, there are a few schools who will ask students for their whole testing history of the SAT and ACT. But it's a very, very small number of schools that were asked for that. Most schools have moved towards what Ronnie referred to as the super score, the highest score in each of the sections. And that just shows up. If you have math from one date and writing one from a different date, they're going to know you took it 2 times, right? But most of them have gone to the super score, and it doesn't really matter.
What does N stand for in the chart?
Yeah, what's the N?
I think it's the number of admissions officers who responded to the question that would have indicated whether they looked at that or not, I believe. It's from so NACAC publishes this. This is available for everybody. It's the NACAC Admissions Trend Survey. And they usually did it pretty regularly. I think because of the pandemic, we've kind of been waiting for an updated one because I think we're kind of curious. I think we have some estimated guesses of how some of these have changed. I certainly think test scores is going to be much lower now that the majority of universities have gone test optional when before most of them were not. Mm-hmm. But yeah, as soon as we're looking forward to seeing that as well.
So do you guys actually see that essays is going to be going up higher?
I would have thought that.
Yeah.
Until.
Yeah, I think with large language models and like the addition of AI, essay writing, that could actually end up going down in in years coming. Although I don't imagine much will change this year. Yeah. Usually universities have a kind of 1 to 2 year window when they want to as things change and they kind of evaluate their classes and they see how students are doing and they kind of make decisions usually a year or 2 later. So certainly if you had younger children, if you have 9th graders, 8th graders, I could see essays being maybe less important or a different version of that. But we're going way down a rabbit hole now.
They are starting to talk about different options, different ways to get to know kids that wouldn't be having the opportunity for the influence from someplace else. But who knows? We'll let you know in 2 more years. I do just want to take a minute and look at some Maya Learning information as we're talking about list building. And I have signed into, this is my parent account for Fake Junior. He is the student here at KIS that we have a fake kid at every grade. This is our Fake Junior that we use for a lot of different examples. And I got elected to be its parent. So this is my parent account. So when you sign into Maya Learning, this is what your parent account will look like. If you have never signed into Maya Learning and you don't really know what is happening here, let your counselor know and we can help you figure out how to sign in so that you can see all of this information that's in here as well. So when I sign in, I have one high school student, so his name is Fake Junior. So I would click on his name, and then this kind of brings up the student version. There are limited capabilities for parents, but there's a lot of good information in here for you to see. I'm going to look at two things today. The first thing is the events, and that's where we have all of the university visits that are scheduled for this spring. As parents, you can't sign your kids up, but you can come and see what we're offering and encourage your kids to attend. And there are also some parent sessions that we've scheduled. And because you can't sign up here, we are sending out sign-up sheets to you by email, so you can be on the lookout for those. Or if you don't do that, you can also just see the date and where it is and come. So for example, we have one tomorrow.
I was just going to encourage you to check this often.
Yes.
If you would have logged in here maybe 2 weeks ago, there would have been maybe 6 or 7, and it is really kind of ramping up, and it kind of always does about this time. We're starting to get more emails kind of daily, and so kind of checking this weekly and encouraging your children to check often as well, because there's lots of universities, especially after spring break, that'll be coming.
So the parent sessions are, I try to make this as clearly labeled as possible. They'll start with parent session and then say who it is that's coming. If you click on the view here, you'll be able to see a little bit more. Oh, that one doesn't have any more information. Bad example. You'll be able to see who is one that has one. Here. You can see in the description, it talks about who is coming and what they're going to focus the talk on. The other ones are for students, and they are happening during their lunch break. The parent sessions either happen right before the student session or right after the student session. And unfortunately, just because of the way that they work, it's not possible for us to record those because it's a very short information session and then a lot of questions and answers and just getting to know the students. So we don't have a way to record those right now. But if you want more information, check in with your child's counselor and maybe they can share some more information. Also, the universities also have a tremendous amount of material that is online available, online tours, campus tours, and they often will let you schedule virtual meetings as well to ask your own questions.
A lot of times the people who are coming to these are the admissions reps for this region, for this country, that will be reading your child's applications. And so while it's probably not possible for you to come to all of them, you can certainly encourage your kids to be coming to them, whether they're applying to the university or not. Sometimes it's just good to go to, if they're interested in liberal arts colleges, coming in hearing the different universities speak. If they're interested in going to the UK, if they're interested in Canada, hearing any university from Canada kind of talk about what they look for can give them another perspective and some kind of useful tidbits for when they're kind of completing those applications.
The other thing I wanted to show you today is here on the left. This tab says universities. And you can do a couple of different things. In this search bar, you can search for a university's name, or you can use these search functions like that would match you and your child's match factors. Like if you were looking for a college in a particular state, for example, you would be able to choose the state. If you were looking for a particular range of selectivity, if you were looking for certain majors, and then it would produce a list of schools that match those for you. I just, for sake of quickness, put in UIUC here, and then it will come up for you, and you could just click right onto the name, and it will bring you to this university fact sheet where there's a lot of information across the top about the school and the admissions tab, where we're going to look in just a second. The other thing you can see at the top, it says considering. Your child will have this considering list. Hopefully they already have some schools in considering. This is kind of like a workbook space for them. They can add and remove colleges as they go through this university research process. So under Fake Junior here, he's considering a lot of schools right now, and you'll see this list of schools come up. So you'll see all the schools that your child is considering or has found to be a match factor for them in one way or the other.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Just in our previous lesson, we kind of started this process with grade 11s, and we're asking them to have, I think it's like 15 to 20 schools on their considering list for our next class. So that's something that you could help us with, and just having a look at their considering list and talk with them about the schools that they're considering, because we're going to go through that in our next class with them.
So he's found 22 schools that match his match factors. And then as we're going to start talking about how to build a well-balanced list of schools where my child, Fake Junior, is likely to get admitted, there's a couple of data pieces that are really, really helpful. The first is this Compare All tab, and this will just bring up a list of schools where the number that's listed on here, so for example, Boston University has a 3.94 written for the weighted GPA. That's the average GPA for the students who have been admitted from KIS for the last 5 years. So this is just some KIS data, which is really, really helpful for your children in helping to predict their possibility of being admitted. And you can see that their average SAT score is 1504, and again, that's the average for the last 5 years. So generally, when I look at this list, I would like to see more greens than reds. If my child, Fake Junior, had more greens, that would mean they were choosing schools where he was a better academic fit, right? Where probably he has a much higher chance of being admitted, and I would like him to go to school. So I want to help him create a list that's very well balanced. Another really key piece of information is the scattergram, and we're going to look at a couple of scattergrams. First, we're going to look at Boston University. The scattergram you can find in this little graph icon right here. If a school does not have a graph icon, it is because there have not been enough students from KIS in the last 5 years to show you that data. Sometimes there is data. Sometimes you might know, like, oh, my friend's kid applied there and got in, they should be there. But we don't have enough to be able to show everyone to protect those children's privacy, right? So we only have the graph available if it's a larger number of kids. So just looking really quickly here at Boston University, you can see my child here, where I think they're here. This black diamond is going to be my child, it's going to be your child when you look at yours. So you can see his grade point average is right on the average. The average line is this orange for GPA and the orange vertical for the testing. So you can see when I look at this, okay, I see a lot of green around my kid, but there's not a lot, and they're kind of far off from the average SAT score, but there's quite a bit of green here. So I would probably hope that my child would get into this school, but it's not really likely. But it is a possibility. I would probably call this school a target. Then we're going to look at another school. We're going to look at Purdue to see the difference. Where's my kid here? Oh, my kid's here. He is above the GPA average in Purdue. And do you see how many more greens there are in Purdue compared to the Boston University? I feel like his chances of getting into Purdue are much higher than they were at getting into Boston University. So as I'm starting to piece this list together, I want to build a list where for every single school, there's a pretty good chance my child has a chance to get in. Then we're going to look at one more school just for contrast.
Yeah, I want to add, because I know what school we're about to look at. We talk a lot about about this process and, you know, our conversations with parents and our conversations with students, and a lot of it around the kind of anxiety and fear and worry, and trying to reduce that as much as possible. Because I do think we all really think this process can be really special and exciting, but know that that's not always the case. And it's really, we understand that it can be really hard for a student, for a parent. You've got this emotional, you know, investiture in this process. But that can get in the way sometimes of using the data to make really good, informed decisions. And, you know, we never want to be, you know, the naysayers, oh, you're not going to get in there. But we do want to try to protect students both in their time to make sure that they're kind of working on applications where they're kind of best served and will result in the kind of outcomes that they're hoping for, but also just to kind of think about their own kind of mental process as they go through this. And it can be really, it can feel really good for somebody to say, oh, you could for sure get in there. But if we're not kind of making informed decisions, if we're not using data, if we're not using good information, then yes, that feels good in the moment to hear that, but it's not going to actually serve them well in the long term if it's not true. And again, I just want to preface this. We adore your kids. I'm so excited to write these counselor letter of recommendation. And I tell these kids all the time just how impressive they are. And they really are. But that doesn't always mean that they're going to be able to get into every university that they might be kind of thinking about right now. And so, again, I just want to kind of preface, because I know what university we're going to look at, okay. And it's not as many green in the upcoming scattergram we're going to look at.
So far we looked at Boston University, where we felt pretty good. There weren't a ton of greens around, and we were just at the average line. And we looked at Purdue, where we felt much more confident in our kids' chance to get in. Probably Purdue would be a likely. And then the third school we're going to look at today is Princeton, and I really want you to feel and remember the contrast between the other scattergrams and Princeton's scattergram, and where Milo Jr. is. This is my fake junior.
And that's not easy to do that here. Fake Junior has done really well. I bet Fake Junior has worked hard.
Yes.
Fake Junior would have blown me out of the water in high school.
Yes.
But it's really, really, for these highly selective universities, it's really, really, really difficult. And that's not an indication that this student isn't a wonderful person and can't be incredibly successful. But it is probably indicative of their likelihood of going to Princeton. Because we can kind of see pretty clearly from the data that we, in 5 years, don't have any sort of representation of a student academically like them that Princeton has looked at as a good fit for their university. And that just kind of is what it is. And so again, we want to make sure we're using this lens, as much as we love these kids and as impressive as they are. This is just probably not a good fit for them. This is probably not where they're going to be able to go and be successful and grow into the adult that we kind of want them to be.
So as families, we're hoping that you can work together with your children to come up with a list where they will feel most successful. Their feeling of success and their feeling of reaching towards something that's possible is really, really important. And while we really want to encourage students to have a balanced list between very likely to get in and very reachy, we want to really emphasize the importance of having it be likely that they're going to get into those schools. Do you want to say anything else about this graph? I feel bad when I bring this up. It's hard. And I think as counselors, this is a really difficult conversation for us to have, because we know your kids in a much different way, in a much more personal way. And here they're reduced to this black diamond on this graph. And we, I think also as counselors and as hopeful, optimistic people, we always want to say, yes, you can do anything in life. But this one is not very likely. And that's hard to say that. It's not very likely right now. If Princeton is your dream school and that's the far, far reach that you want to have on your list, then you should absolutely have it on your list. But then it's the job of the parent to make sure that the whole entire list helps to support your child. Has the very, very far dream school on it, but has a lot of schools where they're very likely to get in, because that's where they really should be focusing their time anyways, right? And then there's...
I was just going to say, I think it's okay, like, when you have a school like this on your list. I think where it's hurtful is if that's the definition of success, right? Then we kind of worry about, like, how is the student internalizing this whole process, and how would they feel where this student's not going to go to Princeton? They have a really good chance at Boston University, that I would feel great about them going to Purdue, and there's going to be lots of other schools. But if they get into those schools and they only think of Princeton as what success is, then they're going to look at the whole process through a pretty unhealthy lens. And I think that's one of the things we want to keep in mind when we're talking to them.
And on a longer term scale, that kind of thing is the thing that stops kids from being successful at Purdue or Boston University, because they already see that they have failed. They already feel like they didn't do the thing that they were supposed to do. So your help in creating that really balanced list is really, really important. The other piece of data that I do want to show you, because it's really important to this next screen, is when you click on the university's name here, it brings you to the same fact sheet that we went to before for UIUC. If you go to admissions, this is going to show you the scattergram over here. This is going to show you the university's overall, like their worldwide admissions rate. But down here, this is the information that we use in helping to determine likely targets and reaches at KIS, and can also be really helpful to you in understanding a little bit more about your child's chances of getting in. So for the past 5 years at Purdue, that's so small, I just can't read that, 96%, I think, and we've had 69 kids accepted, which is a 72% acceptance rate for students from KIS applying to Purdue, which is really wonderful. It's close to their overall, but it is higher. In general, you'll see universities' overall acceptance rates are very close to the ones at KIS, but we also do enjoy slightly higher 5-year averages, because we are an amazing school and your kids are really amazing. So our kids get in at a really high rate. So this will show you the number that you're looking for, as well as the exact averages for the SATs and the GPAs. So Maya Learning has so much to offer. I really encourage you to look around and see what your children are seeing, and help them create this list that will put them on that path to success, and success being defined by getting into schools where they'll become amazing adults. Yeah?
So there's some schools that they are much more strong in engineering.
Yeah.
Liberal arts.
Yep.
And the data is not going to be supporting those differences, right?
Right. We don't have the data in here by major. We just have the data in there for yeses and nos and wait lists. Engineering, I'm sure that you know on a whole, if the average is here, engineering is here, right? So that's kind of the guideline that we use when we're talking with our kids. Sometimes universities, if you look at their own website and dig into the information a little bit, they'll give you that data, but we don't have it for the KIS students.
I would say overall, though, it still kind of does work out in these kind of overall averages, because a lot of KIS students are going into engineering, into computer science, into pre-med, into pre-law. That's because they're really freaking impressive, and they have high expectations. And so a lot of that is kind of baked into a lot of that data as well. It's never going to be like apples to apples. Well, this student has this passport and this background and this, but the averages are going to provide kind of a better overall data point for you as a family to use, and for them, than the kind of just general statistics for the whole world. But yeah. So we're going to break down a couple of terms and some kind of expectations of of this process. So again, so we're all on the same page. And as Jennifer was talking about, we will start classifying, or you'll start hearing the terms likely, target, reach. And this really kind of does go specifically to the likelihood and using that data to support that. And again, there's a lot of nuance in all of these conversations, but we do want to draw some kind of clear lines, at least so that when we do use it, we're all using the same definition. And so at KIS, this is how we define a likely school. It's the GPA meets or exceeds the average GPA from the previous 5 years of accepted students at that university. If it's a test optional school, or if it and they're submitting tests, or if it's a school that requires tests, their tests are also at that level or above. And the acceptance rate for KI students is in that 40 to 50% and higher range. So again, thinking about Purdue in that situation, that would have been a likely school for Fake Junior. Target school is going to be the statistics, so GPA, test score being in that range. So green, maybe in some instances it's, I think, gray if it's kind of right on the nose. And then the acceptance rate being above 26%. Again, utilizing Boston University example before, which I think has like a 42% acceptance rate at KIS, something like that. And again, you could see that the GPA was kind of right on the line of the average GPA, was surrounded by greens. The test scores were lower than the average, but in this case, Boston University's test optional, no need to send them in that for Fake Junior. And so again, this would be a good target school. I think it's probably worth going back with likely, that it's likely, it's not guaranteed. So a likely school, we're going to feel really good about that, but there are going to be, you're not going to get into every single likely every time. Target school, we're going to feel good. Again, that kind of 40% acceptance, 45, 50 is usually what we'll see with target schools. And then when we look at reach schools, this is going to be like when we were looking at Princeton, the GPA and or test scores are kind of below the average. Or if the university has lower than a 25% acceptance rate for KIS graduates, then that's just a reach for everybody. And again, so if we think about Princeton, even though a student could be very top of their class and have a 4.15 GPA and a 1600 SAT and their president and all the other amazing things, it's still going to be a very competitive school, and it's still not likely that they're going to get accepted. There's a lot of other factors that come into play with that as well.
I think it's a good time to say, maybe. I just think it's important to note that whether it is a likely target or reach school and it's on the list that your child and you really consider, because you may be going to that school on that list. And so to really pay attention and take care, I feel that sometimes because it's a likely school or it's seen as a likely school, it's given less attention and less focus and less appreciation for how amazing that school is and can be. And so I just want to encourage you, as you're building these balance lists with your children, is to really take time to think, actually, if I were to go to that school, would I truly enjoy and have a good experience there? So just really to take, regardless of what category it fits under, to really take time and consideration about how fantastic that school could be, and does it fit your child and what they like and what they're interested in.
These definitions are an academic fit. And there's a lot more to the university experience than that. And there's a lot of other match factors that they're going to have, and things that you probably care about for them as well. You know, how close to an international airport might they be? How quickly can they come home or you go visit them? Or are you that interested in visiting them in New York in December versus maybe San Diego would be a more enjoyable experience? These factors will also be important. This is just from an academic standpoint, because as we kind of go back to the admissions factors, the grades are going to be really drive a lot of this process. But then what does make the difference after the university kind of seeing if they're a good academic fit is, are they a good culture fit? Are they a good community fit? Are they likely to thrive in our environment? Are they likely to make it a better environment for the other 15,000 students we have here? Are they going to fit? Are they going to find their place? And so that's all those other pieces of the application. So when we kind of look at this list, as we've kind of now broken down the likely, target, and reach, for this student, we would see that there's just a lot of red. And so right now, this list is pretty reach heavy. Each family, each student is going to have their own individual list, and this is going to look different, of course. But I think generally speaking, certainly early on when we're having these meetings, seeing more green will probably make us feel like this process is going to go a little smoother for them, and kind of keeping a lot of options on the table early on in the process. So here's our recommendation. You know, this is balanced. This is exactly balanced. We have 3 to 4 in each of the kind of categories, and the student who has a list like this is going to have lots of options. They're going to get into most of those likely schools. They're going to get into probably a couple of those target schools, and so they're going to have lots of options. Your own balance and what the motivation is going to be different. Again, we're going to have a lot of these conversations, especially when we have some of these one-on-one meetings, which we'll talk about here soon. But again, thinking broadly about what does success look like, and having those conversations is going to be a really important part of this process. Okay, so for those of you who came today, you get to see this information before anybody else has seen it. So every year we start to share out data once we get it back, and this is the early data that we've gotten from our current senior class. And so it doesn't show the final data, it doesn't show regular admissions. This is kind of from the early acceptances that we've seen. And so as we kind of look at this, there's a bunch of numbers up there. And the first thing to say is this is pretty much in line with almost every year. As you can see on the right side over here, if we kind of start with ED1, we see that over the last 5 years, we've seen acceptance rates range from 15% to 37%. And this year we had 17% accepted and 14% deferred. So they're still waiting on their decision. And that's in line with what we would usually expect, especially when we see that 95% of those ED1 schools were considered REACH schools. So those are going to have low acceptance rates. They're a very competitive school. And again, we see numbers that kind of, again, fall in that range. When we look at ED2, we see that acceptance rate went up to 28%, and we see that the percentage of those that were REACH schools goes down to 83%. So we started seeing students for their ED2, so they didn't get into their ED1, had more students who had a target or a likely school, and so we start to see that acceptance rate go up. When we look at our early action acceptance rate, we see 52% with 29% deferred. And then we see that 80% of those applications were to target or likely schools. And again,
the majority of them were likely. 50% of them were likely, yeah, and 30 were target. So for some reason, kids chose very, very high for early decision 1 and much more reasonably for early action, and it really paid off. 50%, 52% acceptance for early admission schools. That's a really fantastic percentage.
And this is where it's really hard not to be emotional in this, but the data is kind of accurate year in, year out, and this is kind of what we expect. You know, the more likely schools, the higher the acceptance rate. And the more target schools, that's going to be a higher acceptance rate. And the more REACH schools, the more denials you're going to see. That's just kind of what's going to happen.
And we were really hoping to share this with you today because you haven't been through this process before. We have, and I think we're able to be much calmer about these conversations, but it's your child, and chances are you haven't been through this before. So we really want to show you this, like year after year. Very similar things happen to our graduates at KIS. We hear a little bit about the rumors and the myths and the concerns of parents, And we've heard a little bit about how you're worried about the overall admissions rates in the US, or just some chatter maybe that you're hearing about admissions and how difficult it is. And we really want to say, it's okay. We've been through this lots of times. Our students have been, our previous graduates have been through it, and it always works out just about the same. We can't control the admissions rate or how many applications universities are receiving, but what we can control is the balanced list that your children create and what you come up with for them to put out there into the universe and for them to get accepted.
I know the numbers can be stressful sometimes. I think, again, for us, it's reassuring to use the numbers and see that, yeah, this is kind of what it'll look like. And the more we can work within that data and using that good information, then I think then if we have a good balanced list, then the students can really focus on the pieces of their application where they can like show that little extra bit about them. You know, I think one of the things that is sometimes worrying is a student or a family is so focused on all these reach schools that they haven't actually identified what the right fit is going to be. And so the student isn't able to articulate that in their essays and in their supplementary, why do we want to go to this school? Because the fact remains that the reason they want to go to that school is because it's highly ranked, and that doesn't write as a very good essay. And so when we have these kind of balanced lists and we have students who and families who are feeling very comfortable, we tend to see students who feel comfortable and are engaged, and instead of being fearful, are able to kind of show how incredible they are and show the different pieces that make them an individual that a university might really value. And so we share this data. You know, we always go back and forth on what do we share, and is it too much, is it not enough? And we hope that it'll at least make you feel a little calmer that it kind of does work out with the data if we kind of trust those numbers year after year and try to block out some of those rumors and myths that we hear. But I don't know if we're always successful in that. And this is just the average applications per year. This is always something that kind of comes up. You know, when we see these numbers and we see 17% acceptance rate, well, if I just applied to 30 schools that have a 17% acceptance rate, well, then I'm going to get into more. And that's never the case. And in fact, again, more is not always better. And the more applications that they're writing and the more essays they're writing and the more pieces they're trying to put together, it usually makes it harder for them, especially as they go into senior year and have more difficult classes and they've got more AP classes. There's a lot going on, and we want them to really focus on putting their best applications together. And this is, again, just showing year after year that the average number of applications that our students kind of put out each year is kind of within the same, 7.5 to 9.5 each year. So we have a limit of 10 applications at KIS, and then for students who are meeting their deadlines, are showing that they're kind of on top of their applications, on top of their schoolwork, then we allow appeals for 2 additional applications. That does include universities where they have multiple campuses. So the University of California is just 1 application to a number of campuses. The UK, you apply to the UCAS to up to 5 campuses there. So that does end up being a little bit more. So there are some more in there, but that's the number of applications that we have.
And it is a firm limit.
Yes.
There's not a negotiation for having more exceptional circumstances. Again, looking at data and being here over a long period of time helps us to see that more is not better and more is not necessary. What is necessary for success is high quality applications. And oftentimes when kids do more applications, the quality actually goes down because there's just not enough time to write more applications. And unfortunately, this is something that we can tell you because we've been through it. You haven't been through it, so you're kind of missing that experience piece. But parents and students who go through this tell us every year in December, when their applications are mostly done, they tell us, thank God you had a limit. When I started in August, I thought 10 was not enough. I thought 12 was not enough. I thought I could do more. But even parents by December were like, I understand now. I understand there's no way that we could have done more. So please have some trust in the professionals that have been here, that have worked with your students along the way. 10 is completely sufficient. If you look at it, the average number, kids aren't even doing, some kids individually are doing more, but the average number is less than 10 every year. So the limit is 10, and it is not negotiable. But it is that way for a very good reason.
One of the things we always, so we have the seniors do a panel for the juniors at the beginning of the year when they're going through their applications. And we always ask them, you know, okay, can one of you tell us, like, how many total essays have you done? Because juniors go into it and they're like, okay, I've got my Common App and I've got some supplementary essays, no problem. And then somebody goes, okay, well, I had my Common App essay and I had my 4 UC applications and then I had 2 to 3 supplements per, okay. And you'll have somebody go, I think I wrote 37 essays. And the juniors are like, oh my God, 37 essays.
That are all supposed to be really good.
Yeah.
And they have to keep up with their schoolwork.
Yes.
And I think from seeing the seniors this year, I don't think they realized that senior year was going to be as equally hard as junior year. And they forget about that piece.
Every year, I don't know about you guys, but I'll have 1, 2, 3 students and they'll turn in their college list at the beginning of the year and it'll be like 6 universities. And I'll go and I'll talk to them and they'll be like, yeah, these are the 6 I want. I'm just like, oh, you're going to do fine. You've got this down. You know exactly where you want to go. It's going to be smooth sailing for you. Again, this isn't to tell you that that's what you should be going for, but I'm just saying that sometimes fewer even works out better. So this is a good time to, again, focus on how do we support them? Because it can be stressful, it can be fearful, and it's really hard. It's hard to put ourselves out there, especially in these essays where we have to kind of lay ourselves bare and then say, please take me. That's hard. I think we've all been through that in a number of ways in our life. You know, if we think about job applications and relationships, and we're just like, please choose me. And that's really, really hard for a 17, 18-year-old to go through that. And so we really want to make sure that we as the adults in their lives are doing all these things to kind of model healthy behaviors and talk about how amazing they are and talk about balance and talking about taking care of themselves and spending time with them, not talking about college. They are going to be inundated with college, them and their friends. I was hosting an event over lunch and talking to, it was a grades 9 through 12, and a couple of the seniors were talking to the juniors about, yeah, in the first half of the year, that's all you will talk about with your friends. You're just talking about your applications, you're just talking about your essays, and it's like, oh, that seems like a really heavy burden. And so as much as we can kind of like try to help them lift some of that, especially for you parents who were spending this last year before they move to a new country, move out of home, like really taking time to enjoy that time and celebrate all the cool things that are happening senior year will be really important.
I wanted to add, I had suggested to one of my seniors in the fall who mentioned that, every time they had dinner with their parents or their family at home, that dinner would be very stressful because they would only talk about college applications. So I suggested to the student to maybe set a separate time aside that's not during like a dinner or a family connection time, so that, the student knows when to anticipate that conversation. It's not going to just randomly happen, and they may be more prepared for it if they know it's like a scheduled time. And 2, you get that time with your family with no stress, right? This student was so stressed. Like for any time that they would have family meals, they would always be stressed out. So just maybe a pro tip coming from your end to maybe have that like separate time that's not during one of those bonding or family times.
Yeah, I love that idea. And then on the other side, we're going to help them. We spend so much time making sure that they're kind of working through this. And so we've done all of these lessons. We kind of continue to work with them throughout the semester and into the beginning of senior year. we have these individual meetings. One of the amazing things, one of the reasons that I came to KIS in the first place is just how few students each one of us has, and so how much time we have to kind of work with them and, read essays and talk about, what college is going to look like and talk about where they're going to be the best version of themselves. We're going to help them with this whole process. And then for you as parents as well, reach out, email us, schedule appointments. That's what we're here for. If you email me and say, hey, can we meet this week? It's going to be, yeah, no problem. In person, Zoom, what works? Right? We're here to kind of help you guys. And again, I love this process. I get to know the students so well, and then when they get that first acceptance, it's such an exciting time. So please reach out, and we're here to support you just as much as we're here to support them. Things coming up. Somebody else want to jump in? I feel like I'm talking a lot.
This is not a pleasant side to look at. I apologize. But the other ones were all nice and colorful with all these cute bubbles and stuff. This is just... but it is, I did want to put this in here because it is important information for you to start thinking about in the back of your mind. These are some of the rules and regulations that we have at KIS, and for you to be understanding what's happening and what those are so that you can support your child. And as you guys are building this list, it works out really well. First and foremost, honesty and integrity in your college applications. These are things you're turning in directly to the universities, but every single piece of the application should be your child's, and that's very, very important. I don't want to talk about early decision quite yet. The maximum applications we talked about being 10. There is a process for us turning in the documents to the universities after they apply, and then the letters of recommendation. So I guess we already talked about all of these things.
This will be on, there'll be some documentation
Yes.
that you'll get at the beginning of senior year, and so this is just what that looks like.
Where's that other, oh, this one. I missed that one. This is also something that I do want you to tuck away and put in your calendar maybe. We at KIS do encourage very, very strongly for your children to be submitting their applications to the universities 2 weeks ahead of time for many, many different reasons. 2 weeks ahead of time, if your children are working 2 weeks ahead of time, that procrastination thing that happens to many, many people, many humans, there's much less serious consequences if I turn it in, say the deadline, for example, at the university is November 1st. Your children are working to submit their applications by October 18th. If procrastination happens and they turn in their application on the 20th of October, perfect. It's okay. However, if they were working towards a deadline of November 1st and they were procrastinating and 2 days late, and they tried to turn it in on November 3rd, they would have missed their opportunity, and that's a very, very serious consequence. You can't apply to colleges past the deadline. So we have them working ahead of time so they are able to submit their best application without procrastinating and without what happens after procrastinating when kids rush through stuff. You just see them at their computers just typing like mad, and they don't even know what they're typing. They're just typing to fill up the character limit. It's really not good. It's not high quality that we're aiming for. So to encourage them to put out their best application 2 weeks ahead is really what they're looking for.
There's also just some pragmatic things that happen in life. You get sick, there's a medical emergency, there's a family emergency, there's a car accident, the credit card doesn't work to pay for the application fee because it's an international card, and you're paying for an application in California, and you need to call your bank, and if you're doing this in the last second over a weekend, they're going to say too bad.
Yeah.
Right? When these things happen and you turn in the identity project to Mr. Van Moppus a day late, he kind of gives them a stern look and says, next time, don't do that. That's not going to be the case with these applications. And so again, there's lots of reasons to be working towards these early deadlines. And really another one is just, it'll lower their anxiety, it'll lower their stress if they're getting these things done ahead of time.
Other pragmatic things happen as well. I think historically, Common App goes down. I don't know why. I do know why. Common App usually goes down on October 31st because everybody, except for our kids, everybody else in the world is finishing their applications, and Common App crashes. Well, then what do you do? right? But that usually when that happens, doesn't bother our kids. We're already done. No stress, no worry, no panic. Like, what am I going to do? How am I going to do this? Because they've already done it. So please do start using that vocabulary with your kids and encouraging them to be working the 2 weeks ahead is really, really helpful. One important piece of that does happen during winter break. Winter break, we will send all the documents to the universities where they've applied before winter break. So again, that 2 weeks ahead, working ahead. And then we will again start sending documents after we return from winter break, which is in early, mid-January. So if your student has deadlines, and there's a very, very common deadline here for regulars right around January 1st, they should be working at that 2 weeks ahead and turning in their applications before winter break, so we send documents. We don't send documents over the weekends or non-school times or winter break included. So that is something that you'll want to be thinking about.
There is also not a single senior that after this whole process and their first semester of senior year and all these classes and all these applications and all these essays, and then it gets dark and it gets cold and they get to this break, is in any sort of place to write any good applications. Good applications do not happen at that time. They happen months and weeks before then. And so really with the idea of being done completely before December break, so that they can relax and they can spend time with friends and family and celebrations and going skiing in Japan and all sorts of fun things. That's what that time is really supposed to be. So it'll be a good time for them to come back for their last semester of high school refreshed and feeling good about that process.
So we gave your children homework last week when we saw them. This is, I think, the first time we've given homework, but if you could help us with that as well. The homework that they have is they have already identified their match factors, the things that they're looking for in university, and their homework is to do the research and find 15 to 20 schools that they're interested in checking out. It's kind of like a preliminary college list. It's not set in stone, and universities are going to come and go from that list, but it's a list of schools that meets their match factors and also has a wide variety of admissions possibilities. So some likelies, some targets, and some reaches.
And this will be a good kind of jumping off point when we have our conversations after spring break. When we do our one-on-one meetings, we'll be looking at these lists together and asking, why are these colleges on there, right? What are the reasons that you feel like this is a good fit? Why did you put it there? Why did your parents want it there? And that'll be a good place for us to have some of these conversations. Again, right now, students, you as families, should be expanding the options, not narrowing down, not trying to lock in, okay, we know exactly which 10 schools right now. This is exploration phase time. We just want you as a family and them as kids kind of starting to try on these different ideas and think about what are going to be the important things and opening up to all these universities that sometimes they just haven't even heard. Right now, they might only know 15 or 18 schools because those are just the only universities they've ever heard of. And so we want them doing kind of research into some of these other schools.
And just to plug in the college visits that we have is a part of this. Encouraging your ask, oh, did you go to that college visit today? Or and so many times I've had some of my students go to college visits and be like, Mr. Samuels, that college was incredible. And they've never actually necessarily heard or considered that college before, but getting that first-hand experience of that college through a college rep has really opened their eyes. So over the next few weeks, really encourage your child to see some of these different colleges that they may not have considered.
I went to the University of San Francisco reps one, and I was like, their apartments are their dorm rooms are nicer than my apartment.
I wanted to go there.
Yeah.
Yes, that was such a nice place. It had these nice little courtyards down below. Oh, it's very nice. And then this to-do list, this is a nice thing to take a picture of. Again, we'll send this out, but we are expecting your children to attend those universities and continue doing that research. In the months of March and April, we will have several different lessons with your children where we're actually starting and mostly completing their common application. So that will be something that's off their to-do list. We will be looking for you and your child to schedule a junior meeting with us individually. I think we all have them on our calendar, and we are ready almost to have them scheduled. We'll send you an email when we are.
We'll send it.
Okay.
Each one of us will send an email to all of you with our calendar, so you can book those after spring break.
In April and May, that's when your children will be letting us know which teachers they would like, and we'll go through that process. At the end of May, so after AP exams, we'll be working on their Common App essays with them. And then during the summertime, that's where they can be completing the counselor letter of rec survey, and you can do that as well. And then also during the summer, continuing the process of refining that considering list. And if you're traveling at all, going to see campuses. Even if they're campuses that you don't know, you're not familiar with, go to a public school, go to a liberal arts school, go to a small private school, go to a school in some rural area versus a school in the city, so that your child can really experience what that different match factor looks like and what that would mean to them. So anywhere you go, you can find a university. And then we also, on April 4th in the afternoon, have another mock admissions activity. Even if you came to join us in the fall, we still encourage you to come to this one. We're not going to use the same 3 applications or the same university, so we'll have new information. And for those of you who have been, it would be great if you start talking amongst your friends about it, so let them know what it is. What a mock admissions activity is, we have 2 or 3 applicants, and you'll see all of the pieces of their application. So you'll see what their common application looks like, some sample teacher letters of rec. These are not kids from KIS. But you'll see sample teacher letters of recommendation and counselor letters of recommendation and their essays. And you will pretend that you work at a university that will come up with this persona for this university, and you will be pretending that you work there to select only one. You can only select one of the 3 students to attend your university. And this is a wonderful activity for you to see how this actually works and how the application comes together and how students come to life from these different sets of paper, so that you can encourage your child in the best way that you can.
We did hear some feedback from other parents who have went to the last one, that you wanted more time with the applicants. So we'll try to build that in as well, because we know that like having those discussions is really enlightening. And it's just a fun activity.
It's fun. And that's it.
Whew, we took a long time. I apologize if this went longer than the 1 hour. We hope the information is useful to you. We know that this is a really big time in your students' lives, and they've been working really, really hard towards this. So we want to make sure we're trying to provide you guys good information as much as possible.